Hello, everybody. Welcome to Creation Myths. I am thrilled tonight. Got a really fun conversation to have. I am here with my friend David Neff, and we are going to talk about an event from not just like this past weekend, but the weekend before that David attended. It sure sounds like a lot of fun. And I watched the video of the event, and that is linked down below. So if you want to watch it and then come back and listen to this, you can. Or if you want to listen and then watch later and get all the fun details, you can do that too. So the event was Dr. Rob Carter of Creation Ministries International appeared at Calvary Chapel in Frederick, Maryland, or Calvary Chapel Frederick in Frederick, Maryland, and just gave a whole big thing. It was like a 3-hour talk in 3 parts. So it was about an hour, little break, about an hour, little break, about an hour. 3 different topics. And David was there and got to actually see all this fun stuff live and in person. So we're going to talk about the event. We're going to talk about what Carter said. We're going to just kind of reflect on the event. So David, for the people here who don't know you, introduce yourself and tell us what's going on.
Well, hello everyone. I'm David Neff, and I am a student at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, studying biochemistry and molecular biology. Though sadly, I'll probably be withdrawing either before the end of the semester or at the end of the semester due to financial issues. But I am very passionate about science. I'm very passionate about education, and so I run a YouTube channel. I've been mostly doing interviews lately, talking with a couple of different people. I have a lot of really good interviews coming up this week.
I want to at the top do what you have coming up because you have a lot of cool. You just did a really cool one, and you have a bunch of cool ones coming up. So normally we do that at the end. I want to do that right at the top and say, everybody, if you are watching and you are not subscribed to David Neff, go do that.
Yes.
I'll link it in the description. I have not yet, and that is a dereliction of duty on my part. But go find David Neff's channel. Run, do not walk, go subscribe because he's got some really cool stuff coming up. David, tell us what's coming up.
So on Wednesday, I have Dr. Mark Pollack coming on. We're talking about GMOs and other topics. He is got his PhD just this past year or so in plant virology, which is really fun. On Friday, I am going to be talking to Jordan on homeopathy. We're going to be exploring whether or not homeopathy is science, and if it's not, we're going to be discussing, okay, what are the harms from homeopathy? And Saturday, I am
Before we get to Saturday, that's Jordan. That's how do people know him other than Jordan? That's
Jordan, Reason to Doubt.
Reason to Doubt.
Yep,
Thank you.
yep, Jordan from Reason to Doubt. And Saturday, I have a former Answers to Genesis employee. And I also have another stream coming on Saturday at 9:15, and that is going to be a special stream that I'm going to announce later in the week. I'm really excited for that event, and it is going to be a lot of fun. So definitely subscribe to my YouTube channel, hit that like button, and if you're not subscribed to Dr. Dan, hit that subscribe button and that bell notification down below, and hit the like button on this video.
Yes, thank you. I want to just make sure everybody goes over and watches that video with the with the former AIG employee. That's going to be awesome. I'm super excited for that one. So, so let's get into this event. So this event, David, did this event have like a specific title, or was it just kind of Rob Carter doing the speaking circuit thing? I didn't see like a specific like creation weekend that like there wasn't a specific thing. It was just Rob Carter doing his thing.
Yeah, I honestly can't remember exactly if it was titled or not. I could go back and try and find if it was titled, but basically there were 2 days. It was Saturday and Sunday. On Saturday there were 3 topics, and on Sunday he did 1 topic. And Frederick is about an hour 45-minute drive from me. About a 30 to 40-minute drive from where I go to school. So I figured, you know what? This is the closest CMI events to me and for the next foreseeable future. So why not I'm off that day. I don't have any class or anything to do, so why not go and hear Dr. Robert Carter in person, especially since we've been making a couple of video responses to some of the content that he's made. Figured I might
Yep.
want to go and meet him face to face. So I left my house and got there. And when I actually got to the place, I actually thought I was in the wrong location because Calvary Chapel, the place where it was, looked like it was part of a strip mall, which was kind of unusual. Um,
Right.
but yeah, and so I got there a little bit early, just because I wasn't sure how traffic was going to be. They had a table for with a bunch of books and DVDs and CDs for sale, and a couple other and Dr. Carter was there, and so was Salvador Cordova, who runs the Evidence and Reasons channel. He's a good friend of mine, and we've had a couple conversations with him. So I got to meet him, and we took a picture together, all three of us.
Oh, it's so funny. I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah, and it was a pretty decent sized crowd.
Good. So, okay, so we get there. So did it just go right into like, hi everyone, welcome to the creation event. Here's Dr. Carter, science, or was there kind of a introductory speaker? Was there a service beforehand? Like, what was the structure of this thing?
So pretty much the event was pretty much just Dr. Carter. There was just one person, if I recall correctly, one person going in and introducing the topic and welcoming everyone to the church, and then going right into the events.
And then, so Carter, he has three parts. And the first part, I think for both of us, is probably the one that we have the least to comment on. At least I personally do. But I know some people who would have a lot to say about it if they watched it, because it was all about dinosaurs.
Dapper Dino,
And
where are you when we need you?
Dapper Dino, friend of the channel, Dapper Dino. I see in the chat over there. If you haven't watched this, you should. There is, and it's linked in the description. And for everybody who's watching, in that the link in the description on the right side, just go to. You might have to scroll down. It's from October 2nd, and it's the CMI event, and it starts with Rob Carter talking about dinosaurs. And basically trying to make the case that dinosaurs are in the Bible, and like historical references to dragons are actually to dinosaurs. And it's interesting. I don't
Yeah,
I mean, it sounded silly to me because at one point he shows like the like a fossil of like a head, and he's like, "Look at this, it's a dragon." It's like, it's a
really?
dinosaur.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
it's not a. We know what that is. Yeah, it was like an ankylosaurus or something. He's like, "Look at this thing with the things," and it's like, "It's a dragon." It's like, that's not a dragon. That's a dinosaur, sir. Um,
Um, and
so
and of course,
that,
and of course, he had to do the Dr. Mary Schweitzer, um,
of course,
of course, because that's where they all starts. And if before the end of the first session, I had my bingo card blacked out.
yeah, yes, I had the same kind of experience as I was watching it. I was going through, and it was just like you have all like the tropes are coming out. Um, and that really, really started in the second section, which was all about Darwin and
Yeah,
how
Darwin.
awful and dumb he was.
So basically, what I got out of this second session is that it was just a big old poisoning the well fallacy. Here's Darwin. He didn't know this. He was a racist. He's bad. Therefore, evolution bad. That's pretty
it
much
hit
the argument in a nutshell.
It
And
was. I went through and took notes on the second section, and the first solid 15-20 minutes was like Darwin didn't know anything. Which, I mean, yeah, it was the 1800s. Like there was a lot, like, yeah, we didn't know about DNA in, the 1800s, but thanks. He was personal. He was a terrible person. He was mean. He would kill animals. He didn't actually invent evolution. Was one of the ones which, like, yeah, we know he came up with the mechanism, but like people before him were like, hey, maybe things evolve. Like that's the whole thing with Lamarck, is that Lamarck had his own theory of evolution that turned out to be not correct, right? And then Darwin was like, oh, actually, it's this other way, right? Uh, he got a swipe in at Charles Lyell in there, saying he was a lawyer, not a geologist. He was like, and then Lyell, who was a lawyer, not a geologist. It's like, why does that matter?
Right,
Darwin
right,
wasn't
especially since
actually a biologist. It was like,
especially since Lyell, geologists have moved far beyond Lyell, and evolutionary biology has moved far past Darwin. So it seems like Dr. Carter is pretending that we're still stuck in the late 1800s with our Darwinian mindset, when in reality we have moved far past Charles Darwin and left him in the dust. And exactly, yeah, there's a lot Darwin didn't know. Okay, great. So why start with why start a speech about what Darwin didn't know, and instead focus on what we know today?
yeah, it's a very common creationist argument, right? Of frame all evolutionary theory as Darwinism, and then attack Darwinism, and then you can attack the straw man of evolutionary theory. And if you can show that
Right.
like Darwin was wrong or Darwinism is wrong, then you have somehow undermined evolutionary theory as a whole, which is silly because Darwinism refers to evolutionary theory as it existed in the 1860s, and like it's not the 1860s anymore. We learned a lot of stuff since then.
Yeah.
So
Surprise, surprise.
it's not, if your goal is to make a case against evolution, like as a field, as a field of study, as a theory that explains biology, then attacking the person Charles Darwin is not how to do that. As you said to me, it's just poisoning the well. That's all it was, just straight up.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm
Poisoning the
like,
well, and
why are
then
we
in
doing
the
that?
in the third section, I admit that I actually had to leave at the end of the second session, so I was just kind of going back through and listening to the third section. And in the third section, we got the most recent common ancestor and a couple other things that are just completely wrong. And just pretty
Well,
much,
I think we should. So I have
but
some stuff in the second section that I want to hear your thoughts on. And then I do want to get to the third section because that's where he actually gets into like genetics and phylogenetics, and it's
really
rough.
bad.
It's not
Yeah,
good. It's
it's
not
really bad.
good. So
Yeah,
in that
and
second section, oh, go ahead.
okay, yeah, and just if you go back and watch the speech, there is a clear reason why he is speaking to a church and not to an academic audience. I bet my that everything that I own, that if he were to speak in front of an academics group, he would not have given the speech that he did. And he knows that his audience is friendly and already believes everything that he
Right.
says. And he knows that his audience isn't going to go home and fact check what he said and see, okay, did he get this right? Did he not get this right? He knows that his audience is just going to, he says, hook, line, and sinker without doing any additional research.
I think that's exactly right. And you can see this in some of the claims he was making that like are absurd to people with a very low baseline level of knowledge in the thing he is speaking of. And one of the things he said fairly early is he was talking about the development of the field of not just evolution, but he was also talking about geology. And he said how he correctly said that we don't follow uniformitarianism anymore as it was proposed in the 1800s. That's not how we operate now. The new kind of theory is called actualism. But then he turned around and said that actualism is just the old catastrophism in
So basically,
a new
it's kind of like,
form.
right, it's basically a bait and switch almost.
Yeah, but like actualism and catastrophism are not the same thing. I am not a geologist. I have friends who are geologists, and I understand what they say some of the time when they talk about geology, but I know that catastrophism and actualism are two different things. Like, they are
Right.
not the same. Just full stop. They're not the same. But Carter is literally, he's saying the modern theory of geological actualism is just the modern kind of rehashing of old style catastrophism. Just straight up says it. He says, I don't have the exact word written down, but the notes that I have are actualism =, catastrophism. So that's the point he conveyed. That is not true. I would assume he knows that, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yep.
I don't know.
Right, and again, there's a reason why he's giving this speech at a church and not to an academic conference. Because if he was speaking this at an academic conference, the audience would be confused if this is supposed to be the keynote speaker or a much needed comedic relief.
Yeah, it's So we have, like, speaking of the bingo card, just going through the second section. Here are like the kind of the arguments he makes, right? He says, in addition to the stuff we've already talked about, he says, first of all, he incorrectly defines evolution. He goes, is evolution just change in populations over time? Like, yeah, that's like literally the definition of evolution.
Yeah, that's literally the definition of evolution.
Like the textbook, like if you go to, like I have an evolutionary biology textbook sitting over there, and if I get it, that's what it's going to say. Like that's literally the definition of evolution. He wonders, how could jellyfish stay the same if evolution is true?
Right. So basically, he's talking about fossil organisms and saying therefore evolution can't be true because certain organisms have been pretty static.
Right. He's saying I can see fossils.
Yeah. Nothing in evolutionary biology says that organisms have to change drastically over long periods of time. I mean that's just basic common sense.
It's the idea is you're adapted to your ecological niche, right? Then that's going to impose selection to stay the same. If the environment is variable, if it's changing a lot, then that's going to impose selection to adapt to the new conditions, right? Oceans have been pretty similar for a long time, right? The biodiversity changes. There's different things that live in oceans now compared to tens, hundreds of millions of years ago. But like the environment is still an ocean, right? So like, yeah, the jellyfish that existed 500 million years ago or longer, right? That it's the same ecological niche that they occupy. So like in terms of their adaptations for that niche, we don't expect them to change that much. That's how evolution works. You adapt to your niche, and then if your niche doesn't change, then like there you are, right? We're just going to ignore that. We're just going to pretend that's not the case. He also hit irreducible complexity. He said the words.
Yep.
And like, that's not real.
Yep. And irreducible complexity, never mind the fact that we've seen viruses evolve that literally fit the very definition of irreducible complexity, namely HIV evolving directly from SIV. Multiple genetic pathways are necessary in order to get that to work.
Yep, and you need all the novel traits to be able to infect humans, which includes at least 2 new protein-protein binding sites on a single protein. So like, it checks all the boxes. This idea of irreducible complexity, so everyone's on the same page, goes back to Michael Behe's book, Darwin's Black Box from 1996, I want to say. And it's the idea that if you have a system that has multiple parts and you need all the parts for the system to work, then you couldn't evolve that system because all the parts would have to evolve at once. And we're not going to go right now through all the problems with that, but what we're saying is that we've actually witnessed the evolution of systems that meet Behe's criteria for systems that could not evolve because they are irreducibly complex. So it's a completely hollow argument when it comes to anti-evolution arguments, irreducible complexity. And just a little shameless self-promotion here. I've actually talked to Michael Behe himself about this on this channel. You can scroll back through my live streams, and I have a couple interviews with him. The first one was specifically on that, and that was fun. But yeah, it's not a good idea. It doesn't work. But Dr. Carter brought it up because we're hitting all the high notes.
Yep, 10/10, highly recommend. Go watch that video. Those videos, really, because you had 2 interviews, and the second one was when I think The Edge of Darwin or something like that. The Edge of
It was The Edge of Evolution, yes. And I
Yeah.
do need to get him on for a third one on his third book, Darwin Devolves, but I have been way too busy. But eventually
Yep.
we'll do the third one. So another thing that I just have a note to myself in here that in the second section, he's just constantly, Darwin didn't know this, Darwin didn't define that. It's like, man, Darwin, like the field of genetics didn't exist yet. Like, what do you want from Darwin when it comes to like explaining how evolution works?
Yeah.
What did he?
Like if Darwin was still alive today, he would be given a Nobel Prize for his contributions.
Yeah, there's literally the award that the Linnaean Society gives out for excellent work in evolutionary biology is called the Darwin-Wallace Award.
Yep.
Because they both figured it out, but Darwin was first, so it's the Darwin-Wallace Award.
Yep.
We also have this one. I thought was an interesting one because Carter went through several non-Darwinian mechanisms of evolution. He spent a lot of time specifically on hybridization, and seemed to be like the argument he seemed to be making was that is because that is a non-Darwinian mechanism, and that like Darwin didn't think that was the thing that could happen. That is somehow a problem for like evolution as a whole, which. What do you think? I don't know what to say. Like, what?
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much my reaction as well. Like, what?
His argument, the argument boils down to there are more mechanisms of evolution than Darwin proposed, therefore evolution is wrong. That's what that argument is. What?
Really? Yeah,
no?
Exactly. It's like literally arguing. It's like literally arguing that Newton didn't know relativity, therefore all of physics is wrong.
Right. It's like, or even just an even simpler analogy. Just like there are multiple flights from I'm the closest major airport to me is Newark. There are multiple flights from Newark to LAX. Therefore, none of the planes can go from Newark to LAX. What?
Exactly.
How does that? You can't. Okay, but why? That doesn't make any sense. It's silly. And then the next note I have was something that really jumped out at me, and it's similar actually to an argument that Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson makes in terms of how once you propose a rate of change in evolution, whether it's like speciation rates or mutation accumulation or whatever, you're basically obligated to treat that rate as constant. So what Carter says here was something I have never heard this argument before, but this was the structure of the argument. He's saying, evolutionists propose that humans and chimps diverged like 6 or 8 or whatever it is million years ago. But we have a lot of species that they also say are older than that. And if humans and chimps diverged within the last, say, 10 million years, how is it that we have species that are older than 10 million years? Speciation rates are not constant. And like divergence does not happen at a constant rate. It requires a vacant ecological niche and reproductive isolation of some kind.
Right, exactly. Right, exactly. This is like literally high school biology.
Like, I have a hard time believing he was making that argument for real, honestly, because it's just not it's not serious, right? Like, am I like in the chat, people? Am I like, is my indignation misplaced here? Because that sounds like not a serious argument to me. Like, even at the slightest, like this speciation event happened in a certain amount of time. Therefore, it's unreasonable to say that other species have lasted longer than that. That's the argument. No, like, evolution does not happen at a constant rate across all populations. You can have speciation that happens way faster than that under certain cases, like, thank you in the chat, adaptive radiation. You could have situations like the aforementioned jellyfish that are essentially stable for hundreds of millions of years. It's not going to happen. Speciation and divergence don't happen at a constant rate. like population divergence is what I mean. Doesn't happen at a constant rate. You can't just, I don't know. That's just not a serious argument. That's,
Yeah. Do you actually want
I
to
got nothing.
pull up his speech and maybe play a little bit of what he said?
I do not have a timestamp. I don't have timestamps for any of this because I was listening to it while I was doing other things and like taking notes on the side as I was listening, but doing other stuff. So I don't have timestamps for any of this. Otherwise, I totally would, but
Yeah.
I just don't have to. I don't have it stamped.
Yeah.
I'd have to find it all.
Yeah, I think
Oh man.
there are a couple things I want to skip through because I think I might have timestamps for a couple of things that he said. Because in the third speech, he really, really, really butchered Ministries and Common Ancestor, and he really butchered
we're gonna get there.
Yeah,
We are gonna get to that third part. It's so bad. Because that's where he really went like he got a lot more technical in that third part, and it's so bad. There was one more note that I have on the second part, and it was when it was right at the end, and he's talking about how what we now know in terms of like evolutionary relationships and universal common ancestry is that the relationships don't so much resemble a neat tree that branches, but because of things like horizontal gene transfer and hybridization and other, recombination, gene flow, all that fun stuff, it's more of it's a bush, or it's got a lot of roots, right? It's all this tangled mess of lineages. And so what he says is, therefore, so he takes that, he's got the evolutionary tree where it's like the one, and then it goes, right, the old style. And then he's got the new one where it's like kind of a tangled mess at the bottom, lots of crisscrossing, and then extant stuff at the top. And he goes, but creationists have an explanation for this. It's a forest where you have individual lineages that are their own trees. And it's like, we have an explanation for the bush, right? It's that different genes within a genome or different regions within the genome have independent evolutionary histories due to things like horizontal gene transfer. So yes, you don't get one single tree. You sequence this part of the genome and you get one history. This part of the genome gets you often a similar but slightly different history. That is well understood, right? But then he goes right to independent.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually do want to play this. I have a timestamp for what he said at the very end, and I really want to play what he actually said.
Yes. Okay.
Here, this is where he basically gets into.
Skip here to close to the end. Now I'm going to read you something that's politically incorrect.
Well, here, can you pause for a second?
Angry.
So just to introduce this is now in the third part. So we're done with the second part.
This is actually the end of the second part. This is the second part.
Okay, cool. Never mind. I'm wrong. Play the end of the second part.
This is the very last thing he says in the second part. So,
it should disgust you. But this is the science in 1800s. In The Descent of Man, 1871, Darwin writes, at some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man, which he meant himself, will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. At that time, the anthropological apes will no doubt be exterminated. The break between man and his nearest allies will then be wider. For intervene between man and a more civilized state and some ape as low as a baboon, instead of now between a Negro or Australian and the gorilla. So in order for humans to change, in order for us to evolve, you have to kill off the less advanced versions of humanity. Well, Sedgwick, remember Sedgwick from before? He writes Darwin the month after Origin of Species is published. I've read your book with more pain than pleasure. Parts I read with absolute sorrow because I think they're utterly false and grievously mischievous. You've deserted the true method of induction. Ouch. Could you imagine getting that from one of your idols when you were younger?
So can we pause?
Now, he continues.
So first thing, let's just be clear about this. Darwin, rich British dude in the 1800s, was a giant racist. Like, let's just be clear about that. Like, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Does that mean that what he said about natural selection was wrong? because that's what Carter's trying to do here, right? This is Darwin was bad, therefore
Right.
Darwin was wrong. That does not
Yeah,
follow.
exactly. Right, and by the way, I do want to point out a couple of good comments. Dr. Mark Krolik pretty much sums it up. What the fuck? WTF? Yep, pretty much. And
Basically, yeah. Yep.
yeah, he and the Wizard, shocker, 19th century white man was racist. And
Right.
yeah,
Like
and
19th century white man who's the thing that not rich white man whose thing, like the Voyage of the Beagle, that was a colonialist project, right? Like, so this is not coming out of nowhere. This is like the whole framework for this is white supremacy and colonialism. Now, it's worth noting that Darwin was reasonably progressive for his day. Like, he was a very outspoken abolitionist, for example. But he doesn't get like bonus points for that, right? Because it was the 1800s. Like, it was obvious, like when they wrote the Constitution of the United States, that slavery was a crime against humanity, and they kind of just looked the other way on it, right? Because the people doing the writing were benefiting from it. So you don't get credit in the 1860s for being an abolitionist at that point. That's oh good, you've reached like the bare minimum of decency.
Right.
But he couldn't hit the next step of like, also all people are people and are not inherently worth different amounts because of where they are in the world, right?
Right.
So
and, Dr. Pollock sums it up nicely. Does he really think that evolution implies the death of prior, less evolved forms? Also, is he seriously under the view that we evolved from currently existing apes?
For the second part, he did say that we diverged from chimps in terms of like the evolutionist perspective, that we diverged from our common ancestor with chimps. So I think he gets that part. But
and
yeah.
by the way, he should take a look at his own church at this time, because the church was violently racist and violently anti-Semitic. The Northern and Southern Baptist, the Southern Baptist Convention literally split from the Northern Baptist over the issue of slavery, and the Southern Baptist didn't even apologize until 1994. So, how was any of that Darwin's fault? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that fun fact: you ever heard of Bob Jones University?
I sure have, and I know the story you're going to tell. Go for it.
They literally banned interracial dating until like 2000. Yeah, in 2000, if you were a student at Bob Jones University in the year 2000, you'd be expelled for dating a person of a different race.
Yep. One more note on this that I'll just point out is that being an awful human being doesn't make your scientific ideas right or wrong. And if we need a more recent example of this, for those of you who know of James Watson of Watson and Crick fame, I'm never gonna leave an opportunity on the table to remind everyone what a terrible human being James Watson is. But that doesn't mean DNA isn't a double helix, right? Like, he's awful, but like, they also figured out the structure of DNA, and it is what it is, independent of James Watson being an awful person, right? Racist, sexist, like, he's just terrible. And everyone looked the other way too long because of who he is. But like, man, being a jerk doesn't make you wrong. And that's true for right now, and that's true for back then. So like, yeah, if you don't know James Watson, super racist, and not in the past tense, in the present. He got fired from like some honorary bigwig position like within the last 5 years because he said some racist thing out loud at a conference, and everyone was like, well, you said it out loud, we got to take away your title now, even though he'd been saying it quietly forever, and everyone just kind of pretended, look the other way. Yeah. All right, do you have another clip you want to play, or should we just start talking about the third part and talk about all the terrible genetics?
Let's start by giving an overview of the third part, and then we can get into some of the third part stuff.
Yeah.
I think
All
I
right,
have
so let me
some
put this down.
timestamps.
Yeah. Okay. So the third part is all about. Hang on, we're not the right sizes before. That's better. So the third part is all about human evolution human genetics, phylogeny, out of Africa hypothesis, he starts with a frankly very weird thing about race and racism, and it winds back around to the idea that racism is bad, which is good that he gets to that point. And I think the point he was trying to make is that evolution leads to racism, but creation leads to not. And that does not follow. That is not the case.
Especially since there were many racist Christians, and sadly there still are many racist Christians.
It's almost like race is a social construct that's based on the power structures and societal structure in individual contexts and not based on any objective standard. Weird. Odd how that works. So he goes, he actually, the specific thing that he says that kind of makes you go, you sure you like that phrase? He says, how do, and this is his phrase, racial differences develop since Noah's flood?
And he actually, in the third, by the way, in this third section, he calls out Salvador Cordova by name.
Oh, I must have missed that. Did he really?
Yeah, and he guessed what area he was from.
Oh, that's so funny. I totally missed that. I was, like I said today, I was as I was watching this, I was doing a bunch of things, everything from like number crunching on spreadsheets to folding laundry. So I totally missed the totally missed him calling out South. That's funny. So in terms of like the genetics here, he does he does a couple of things. He does two kind of big things. One is he breaks out the if you're familiar with the 3-node tree trope that creationists do, where they look at like mitochondrial DNA, the mitochondrial phylogeny, and they see that there are 3 kind of central nodes in an unrooted tree of human mitochondrial DNA. And he doesn't do the thing where he specifically says that those 3 nodes represent the daughters-in-law for Noah, so Noah's sons' wives. But he walks right up to that line without saying it. He basically says this structure, you can see like biblical characters present in this structure. The other thing he does with it is he confuses divergent or divergence and diversity, which is weird because he points out that some of the branches are longer than others, indicating greater degrees of divergence, right? So like if you have a bunch of lineages that are close together and then a long branch to another lineage, then it indicates that there's a lot of divergence there. They're different from each other. And he says, well, that breaks the molecular clock because clearly, according to evolutionists, they shouldn't have, if they have constant mutation rates across all these groups, then you shouldn't have these big differences in terms of the divergence. And that's not right, because what we have is differences accumulating in these lineages that have been isolated from each other for long periods of time. But within those lineages, you don't have more diversity, right? It's not that one lineage has a lot of like diversity in this one specific lineage, and then this other lineage has very little. It's what we're measuring with the molecular clock is how different they are from each other, right? Which is a different thing from the diversity within the individual lineages. And this is something that I've corrected a number of kind of amateur creationists on. Rob Carter starts this section, or says pretty close to the beginning of this section, that he's a geneticist. So I would expect a geneticist to kind of like get that. I would expect him to not get that wrong, because that's a fairly like elementary distinction, right? The distinction between divergence, how different two things are, versus diversity, how much variation is there within each of those lineages, right? You can be low diversity, but highly divergent at the same time.
Right, like, I mean, come on, people. This is literally high school biology. I
don't know if that's high school bio. I don't know if that's high school bio, but that's like pretty low level evolution. That's like I teach that in an intro evolution class. It's a 200 level class, and I teach that.
Yeah,
So
I took honors bio in high school, so maybe that's why I got it there, since I took the honors section.
okay, so yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's a simple distinction, the diversity versus divergence. And when we're doing time to most recent common ancestor analysis or calculating the coalescent time to a most recent common ancestor, we're using the divergence, but that's different from the diversity within the individual lineages in question. And Rob Carter muddles that distinction, by which I mean he ignores it and treats them as the same thing, which is improper.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of stuff that he gets wrong in the third section.
He also hit, you mentioned this a little while ago, that he completely face plants on what the mitochondrial and Y chromosome most recent common ancestors mean.
Yeah, and he also completely butchers mitochondrial Adam and Eve.
Yep. So
And
he says, oh, go ahead.
yeah, basically what he said is that, if I can recall it, that this Adam and Eve somehow the people that we all descended from, something like that. Can't remember his exact words.
He said, so he says that we have his exact, the phrase was one male and one female ancestor for all of humanity, is what he said. And that's wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
What the actual situation is with your mitochondrial most recent common ancestor and your Y chromosome most recent common ancestor is that you can trace all of the existing diversity in your Y chromosomes to a most recent common ancestor. You can also trace all of your mitochondrial DNA, right? All the existing diversity to a most recent common ancestor. Those two individuals must necessarily, because of the way Y chromosomes and mitochondria are transmitted, they must necessarily be a male is the Y chromosome common ancestor and a female is the mitochondrial common ancestor. Now, the problem there, go ahead.
It should also be worth pointing out that the most recent common ancestor, as you pointed out in a couple of videos, is not static, but it changes from generation to generation. So this generation's mitochondrial most recent common ancestor is not the same as the most recent common ancestor from your generation and the generation before, and so forth. Yep. So it keeps changing as generations go by.
As you move forward in time, the date of that most recent common ancestor will also move forward in time. It's not set at a specific point. Yeah.
Right. And it should also obviously be pointed out that the most recent common ancestor is not the first human. The origins in the common ancestor is not the same thing.
Not the same thing. The most recent common ancestor does not represent the first of a thing. The first of a thing doesn't even make sense in the context of evolutionary biology because you're always talking about populations rather than individuals. And those most recent common ancestors were not the only individuals alive at the time. They were members of populations.
Right. It's like asking who was the first person to speak Italian. Like the question is, the question is nonsense.
Yeah. And then one more problem with all of this, and specifically where he says one male and one female ancestor for all of humanity, those are only the most recent common ancestors for those specific bits of DNA, the Y chromosome and the mitochondrial DNA. They're not the most recent common ancestors for all the rest of the genome. Other parts of the genome are going to have all other most recent common ancestors. This is actually contradicting the argument he made in part 2, where he said it's the instead of the tree of life, it's the bush of life, it's the shrub of life, right? Well, if it's the shrub of life, then you don't converge at one specific thing. All different parts of your genome are going to have all different common ancestry. But then here in part 3, he says, no, you go back to these two specific individuals. Which is it, Rob? I mean, he's right the first time that it's not a neat tree. It's a shrub, right? With lots of branches going back and forth. And the implication for that is that you can take the most recent common ancestor for any one part of the genome, and that's not necessarily going to be the most recent common ancestor for any other part of the genome, which means you cannot point back to two specific people. And that's putting aside the notion that they coexisted, which the ranges just barely maybe overlap, but they probably didn't.
Yeah.
So much wrong. So much wrong.
Yeah, exactly. I I actually just found the event on YouTube, and I'm looking at the transcript right now.
Oh, great.
So I'm actually trying to go through now and point out some of the stuff that he actually said in that section, because there's a couple things I want to put under.
There we go. Oh, this is great. Yeah, we got the whole thing right here.
Yeah.
I'm going to see if I can. I just pulled it up. I'm opening the transcript. I am going to see if I can find where he says, where is it? Female. Three. Oh, here we go. It's at, here we go. So the Bible claims it's one male. That's
Yeah.
not a requirement of evolutionary theory.
Also,
Yeah, it's one. Yeah, it's like 171. Here, if you want to share it, I'll
share it.
Yeah, you're ahead of me in finding it.
Yeah, well, I'm actually wanted to back up a little bit.
Go.
Back up to what he said earlier, and he was using the poisoning the well again, pointing out Dr. William Lane Craig and some stuff.
Oh, I totally forgot there was a whole big thing on Francis Collins in here.
Yeah,
that was in poor taste. I kind of zoned out at that part, but from what I gathered, like not a fan of Francis Collins, who's now just stepping down as the head of NIH. He says of Francis Collins, he says claims to be an evangelical Christian, and I'm not going to question that. Well,
and then he questioned it.
You just did by saying that. By saying he claims to be an evangelical Christian, you just questioned it. That's what you just did.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, so let's pull this up.
Yeah. Let's get color difference. Here's where he mentions the out of Africa theory.
Oh, that whole part. Yeah, I didn't even mention that. That whole part was a mess because he talks about how it actually works for Middle East, and it 100% doesn't. There's so many problems with that.
Yeah.
Me and for those of you who know Just a Walking Fish, who has an excellent evolution oriented channel, you should check that channel out. Me and him did a video on Dr. Carter claiming to be able to get around the out of Africa stuff, and not only do none of his 6 explanations work, they're actually self-contradictory. So yeah, no good. All right. Also, Neff, your tab right there you got YouTube muted, so make sure you unmute it once you hit your spot. There you go.
Thank you so much for pointing that out, and thank you for reminding me. I appreciate it. So let's start here, because there is a lot wrong.
All right, let's do it.
And you would never know because of skin color differences. So, next question is, did we come out of Africa? Well,
yeah, we did.
I want to take the standard out of Africa theory here. This is a out of Africa map based on human mitochondria, which is a little piece of DNA you only get from your mothers. And the way this works is, as it's passed down from generation to generation, every once in a while a mutation will happen and a new branch in the family tree form.
Sorry, I'm trying to get my thing back up.
You got it. I think you're okay. It sounded good.
Yeah, my YouTube just froze on me.
Oh no.
If you look at all the branches, you can trace them back to the founder of the human race, as far as the mitochondrial founder.
Okay.
And
no,
when they mapped
wrong.
it on the Earth, they have this.
That's wrong. It's not the origin. It's the most recent common ancestor is not the origin. It's that's wrong. Like that. Doesn't matter what he says from there. He's starting from like an obviously wrong thing. If he's conflating the most recent common ancestor with the origin, with the founder, like that's wrong. They're not the same.
Out of Africa theory. Except looking at this, forget the Africa part. As soon as they leave Africa, it becomes the biblical story. There's a single dispersal of people into uninhabited territory with one main mitochondrial lineage moving in small people groups through the Middle East.
Can we pause?
in the recent past.
Can we pause? Because there are like 4 things wrong right there. First of all, if you ignore all the data that contradicts our model, it's totally our model. Like, come on. If you ignore the Africa part, then it matches the biblical model. Sure. Okay. But like, all the data points to Africa. Second thing, it's not one movement into the Middle East. There were at least 2, probably more, and they followed different routes. There was one route out of Africa across the Sinai Peninsula. There was another one across like modern day, like Djibouti, across into modern day Yemen, right? And kind of the coastal route across the south of the Arabian Peninsula. So like, this is just wrong, just completely nonsensical. What are we doing? Go ahead and hit play, but I'm going to continue to be indignant because this is like offensively wrong.
Yeah, sure. I'm actually wanting to go back up a little bit just because there's something that I missed that I'm just reading through the transcripts and I should play.
Great. Will it make me less angry or more angry? Because if we had let that clip play, my blood pressure was going to keep going up because that was like, we got like 20 seconds in and it was just, everything was wrong.
Yeah. Let's see here.
Like, and for people watching, that's the caliber we're talking about. I'm going to pull up, I'm going to see if I can find the actualism part here, because that was just blew my mind. Oh, pause, please. Thank you. Actualism, find actualism. The direct quote on this, and I'm reading from the transcript here. I'm not going to pull up the video, but it's direct quote on this. Geology's changed a lot. There's a lot of catastrophism today in geology. Now, they might call it actualism instead of uniformitarianism, but it's still catastrophism. And it's really funny because the catastrophism of the 1800s was fought tooth and nail, and in order to get it back into geology, it took a lot of work by some very dedicated people. So there he is, just like straight up conflating the modern theory of geological actualism with the old idea of catastrophism. Like, again, I'm somewhere between, I'm surprised that he would make these claims. I'm indignant that he would do it. And I don't know what to think in terms of, does he actually believe this or is he pandering, right?
Right.
That's where I am. Like, that's the takeaway for me on this.
Yeah. So I want to play this section here real quick.
Yeah, please. Go right ahead.
Is it obvious where my ancestors come from? How can you do that? How can you look at someone, my friend here, Sal? How can you look at someone and know from what part of the world they come from? Korea? China? Philippines is my next guess.
Oh, no. Oh, don't do that. That's not, no. Oh. Ooh. That's rough. That's not appropriate at all. Don't.
And certainly not.
Everybody,
if you're a speaker,
don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. If you're at a public event like that, if you're speaking, don't go out to someone in the audience and point out to someone and do that. That's like not appropriate. But
yeah, that's definitely not appropriate.
With some Spanish, okay. See that? I was 1,000 miles away, but I wasn't totally wrong. How is it possible that you can look at someone, and how do these racial differences develop since Noah's flood?
That was the line that I mentioned. So I did catch, that's the line I caught. Oh man, that's rough. That's rough. Yeah. That's cringy. That's really bad. So,
do we need millions of years? Do we need evolution? Those are good questions, right?
Do we
That's
need,
what we're
wait,
gonna
hang
get
on,
to here,
pause.
but-
Does he think that according to evolutionary theory, human migration took millions of years? Because he's talking about how do we get all these phenotypic differences in different human lineages? Do we need millions of years? No, we need like 60 to 80,000. Like, does he think that human evolution, like, I don't know what point he's trying to make there, but it doesn't make any sense because, like, it doesn't take that long to get all the different human lineages because we're all super closely related because, like, things like races that he's talking about are made up groups, right? It doesn't take long to get the phenotypic differences that you see because they're very minor. And we also have like a really robust archaeological and genetic history for humanity, so we know how long it took. It didn't take millions of years. It's less than 100,000 years, right?
And a couple
Yeah.
of people
Big
saying,
yikes.
Big yikes. Dr. Pollock, is he being super racist? Because I think he's being super racist. And Heathen Wizard, this is 100% guaranteed to get you reported to HR in my departments. Yeah. No, I don't think he's being racist here. And I know Sal and Dr. Carter are good friends, so I don't think he's doing it intentionally. But
Yeah.
But that being said, if this was, if you were to call any random stranger in the audience, I think it would have been, like if I was in that position, someone looked at me and did that, I would be very uncomfortable. Let's just put it that way.
Yes. This is, don't do this.
Now, Sal and Dr. Carter, in his defense, they are good friends, so I don't think there was any ill intent for on Dr. Carter's part. So, but yeah, yikes. And Dr. Pollock, racial diversity does not equal human evolution. Yep, pretty much.
Yeah, that's not the same thing. That's no. Okay, well, I have exhausted my notes on all of this. David, do you have anything else you want to hit specifically?
I just wanted to finish playing up this section real quick.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
To establish myself as a geneticist, here's some photographs from my doctoral work. I'm studying these animals, these corals. The guy on the left there, he's only about that tall, maybe.
So he says he's a geneticist.
Yeah. Let's see if I can skip ahead a little bit. And then he talks about genetic engineering. Basically, he says next part is whether or not genetic engineering is wrong. He says no because the Dominion mandates. He does talk about that.
Yes, he does say, God gave man dominion, so genetic engineering is fine. And I didn't know he did the thing with red fluorescent protein, which is interesting. GFP, green fluorescent protein, it's old school. Red is. I didn't realize he was the first person to do what he did with RFP, which is cool. Man.
Yeah. I kind of just wanted to skip it. I want to skip ahead to the very end, and then I want to go all the way back into the first session because there's like one or two things in the first session that I wanted to.
Yeah, let's check it out. So let's hit. Do we want to do the first session and then get to the end and kind of wrap it up, or do you want to jump back? How do you want to?
Yeah, let's just jump back to the first section real quick because he shows this that I think is really funny. Let's see if I can. See if I can. He shows some of the dinosaur proteins. Here's this is one thing that I wanted to play.
Oh, wait a minute. He did say the thing about for anybody. So this is a deep cut, but some people in the audience are going to know. He referenced the Triceratops horn. Just I'm not gonna say any more than that.
Yes.
It was a passing thing. He just by the way, Triceratops horn osteocytes. And for those of you in the audience that know what we're talking about, yeah, he went there. He did the Triceratops horn. And I'm gonna say it like this: Triceratops horn. Right? He did that. So go ahead.
Yeah, this one right here.
All right, where are we?
There's another stegosaur, and it looks even more like a stegosaur than this one does.
Oh, the
Is it a
things. Yeah, keep going.
stegosaur? I don't know. Could it be a stegosaur? Yeah, quite possibly. But
So basically, is this a stegosaur? I don't know. So let's just say it's a stegosaur. Like, what? Now, Aaron actually did a really good video on this called Flintstone Archaeology, and he pointed out that if you actually take away the rocks that are probably just decoration on his back, it looks more like a pig or a baby rhino than it does a dinosaur. So my guess is that it looks more like a pig to me, honestly. If you actually ignore the little stone decorations on his back, it's clearly a pig or a rhino.
And also, if like apes coexisted with dinosaurs, we would find them together in the fossil record.
Right.
Don't, for a reason. They didn't. You can show me all the engravings you want. I don't care, because like we have actual rocks and we can tell when things existed and they don't overlap. End. They're not. God, this is so. Again, indignant, because I don't know if Rob Carter actually believes this. I don't know if he's pandering. I don't know. And I do want to say, Dr. Carter, I would love to have a conversation with you face to face about all this genetic stuff and not the dinosaur sculptures, because I don't care about the dinosaur sculptures. But like, this is kind of, and like the Triceratops horn, like we're scraping the bottom of the barrel here. Come on. Yeah. You can do better than this, right? Come on.
Yep.
All right, what else you got, Neff?
All right. I think I might have one more left. So I'm just kind of trying to read through this transcript real quick. Let's see here. He talks a little bit about theology. First Adam, second Adam, no first Adam, no second Adam.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So basically, he's arguing that a lot of core doctrines go back to Genesis, and then Genesis is wrong, and the core doctrines have to be wrong. Okay, here we go. He mentions Neanderthals. I wouldn't play this part.
Yeah, go for it.
we can also now bring Neanderthal man into the biblical picture. It's been a huge challenge. Neanderthal has been a huge challenge from the beginning, except when you realize that charcoal drawing from the 1800s, it made his mouth stick out more. Why? Because it makes him look like a monkey. These picture in the the skeleton New York Museum of Natural History from 10 or 15 years ago on the left there. Why are both of his knees bent? It's subtle, but it's on purpose. They're trying to make him look more like a monkey. And yet, Neanderthal brains are larger on average than modern human brains. What? Yeah. Shaped a little different. They stick out this way. They don't have a chin. So their skull like this because they don't have a chin. They don't really have much of a forehead. Their face does.
I appreciate that. Was that
sorry,
crash, or are we good?
My YouTube crashed.
Oh.
But I'm going to try and bring it back up. But yeah, I think Kevin is probably in the chat screaming her head off right now. Like, did he really just say that?
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad. Although I do appreciate him accurately getting the chin, no chin thing, which is good. I do appreciate that, because we know. I've seen a lot of creationists actually get that wrong and try to claim that non-human apes do actually have chins, and that is wrong.
Neanderthals do not have chins. I think, aren't Homo sapiens the only apes that do have chins?
I believe that is the case. I will leave it to people who are better informed than me to confirm that, but I know that Neanderthals do not.
Oh. And I do want to point out a couple of interesting things. Is that you have to, if you want to say all of the Homo neanderthals, habilis, and all that, if you want to say all those other human species are also Homo sapiens that diverged around the time of the flood, then
you have a lot of problems genetically trying to get all that diversity, especially since Homo erectus
Yep.
was more diverse between each other than we are between each other. So huge amount of genetic problems right then and there. It just simply does not work. Plain and simple. Okay, we're back to
100%.
business.
Yeah, you can't, and it's worth pointing out because I didn't mention this at all, even though it is one of my hobby horses is getting on creationists for this bad genetics when it comes to Neanderthals and stuff. Is that if you try to, so they have their made up like mutation rates that they try to use to calculate a most recent. Oh, my dog wants to leave the room. Hang on one second, Bean. Come on down. Come on, bud. All right, say hi to everybody. Okay, he's out of here.
Aw.
All right, go on, buddy. Good boy. There you go. Live TV. What you gonna do? So, they have their made up mutation rates. This is Carter uses these genes in that similar work of calculating the most recent common ancestor to be about 6,000 years ago. But then they turn around and you try to shoehorn Neanderthals in that, and we have Neanderthal genomes. You can't fit it using the rates that creationists use. So you have to like come up with another excuse for that. Carter gets into actually some of the excuses. He uses what's called patriarchal drive, which is something I need to address at length because I've never covered it, but it's just a made up way of getting more mutations into a shorter amount of time, based on longer patriarch mutation rates, like the 500, 600, 700-year lifespans in the Bible, saying, well, you get more mutations in the male germline, and that's going to lead to the more mutations. Carter has a paper on this that I'll cover that. Maybe I'll do a little lit review on that one at some point because it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. It's completely just like ad hoc. Here's the observed rates, and then I'm going to draw this line at the rates that I want it to be for the unobserved rates, starting at like 80 years. But yeah, like you said, the genetics just totally don't work. So here, let's go back to this, and I will, whatever clip you want to do, go for it.
Brains are larger on average than modern human brains. What? Yeah. Shaped a little different. They stick out this way. They don't have a chin. So their skull like this because they don't have a chin. They don't really have much of a forehead. Their face doesn't stick out. It's that their chin and their forehead slope back. They have stronger bones than we do, thicker tooth enamel, big brains, stronger.
Okay.
Painted in caves. Made musical instruments out of deer antler on a pentatonic scale. They collected rare minerals and kept them in shells.
Yeah, but none of that means that they are Homo sapiens.
Right. It's the culture argument. It doesn't mean that they're going to, they had culture, therefore they share common ancestry with Homo sapiens, like they are descended from Homo sapiens. That doesn't mean that. That doesn't mean that at all. Like, no.
The whole.
Just no.
They could put a string around them, carry around their makeup. They buried their dead with their heads pointed toward the sunrise, sometimes covered in beads.
Yeah, they did ceremonial burial. Yep.
They had the same exact FOXP2 gene that we have that gives us the ability to speak. They even had the hyoid bone in their throat. Chimpanzees don't have that. Neanderthals did. Looks like they could speak.
Because they're more closely related to us. Share more recent common ancestry. Like, what's your point?
Same brain organization we do. You can tell that from the imprint of the brain on the inside of the skull. They're human. And then modern depictions of Neanderthal. Wow, that's a Neanderthal child from Gibraltar, and they recreate. You ever see those shows where they take a skull and they put clay and hair on it? Oh, what the person really look like? That's really cool. But when you do it to Neanderthal, and does he look like half a monkey to you? Why has he got green eyes? Light hair, freckles?
Because they were adapted for northern latitudes?
Yeah. Yeah, and we would expect that because Neanderthals lived in northern climates, they wouldn't have lighter skin necessarily.
Right.
I mean, how hard is this? This isn't a hard concept. And Guts and Gemmon all the genetics work that has been done necessitates the sister species.
I just want to point that out, that we're getting some basic facts wrong here, apparently. Thanks, Rob. Thank you, Guts at Gibbon, for the correction on that, because I don't know about the primatology side of this, but you do, so thank you for being on that. Yeah, this is, I mean, this is like, in order to make this argument work, you need to ignore all the genetics. You need to ignore the fact that we have Neanderthal genomes, and there's no way to shoehorn Neanderthal genomes into descent from Homo sapiens, right? It does, you can't do it. And I'm not going to go through all the chapter and verse of it here, because like, it's a whole thing, but I've done at least one debate and several videos on this, and it's like, it's not. Neanderthals are not descended from Homo sapiens. They are the sister group to Homo sapiens. We share a common ancestor in the relatively recent past. It was probably like maybe Homo heidelbergensis, maybe. We don't really know. Probably, I think it's, as far as my relatively non-specialist knowledge of this goes, heidelbergensis is a good species to put in that zone, but I don't know specifically what the consensus is right now in 2021.
Yeah, and Dr. Pollack, yeah, if you discount all the dissimilarities to humans, Neanderthals are exactly like humans. Their similarities clearly mean they're functionally identical, right?
Doesn't make any sense. These are bad arguments. These are bad arguments, and worse than bad arguments, these are lazy arguments, which again makes me wonder: is this pandering or is this real? And I don't know. I genuinely can't tell. Yeah, I don't know.
Because we know that some Neanderthals carried those genes that cause, in modern people, those looks. In fact, some of the looks of modern Eurasians might have come from Neanderthals.
Mm-hmm.
It was a...
Yep.
Right. And that's because there was a lot of inbreeding between humans and Neanderthals, and we inherited some of the Neanderthal DNA. It's called hybridization. You should look that up.
Yep. He talked about it earlier. He talked about hybridization. He shouldn't have to look it up. He should know that this is a thing that happens.
But in fact, it's really interesting that we actually found a fossil whose one parent was a Denisovian and the other was a Neanderthal. Very interesting.
Shock when they first sequenced Neanderthal DNA. It's not supposed to be there. It's too old. It can't be there. But they did. It was a real shock when they started.
What was that?
No. I mean, it's older than but like, we know DNA can last for tens of thousands of years. So like, getting Neanderthal genomes, like, we're good at it now. We know how to do it.
And here's the question. It's a question for Dr. Carter and all the young Earth creationists. If all of these fossils are 4,300 years or younger, since these are all post-flood, then why is it that we can't get DNA from Homo erectus, Homo habilis, Australopithecines? None of
dinosaurs.
None of them have DNA. Where is your DNA?
Say non-avian dinosaurs, right? If everything is as young as they say, exactly. If everything is as young as they say, then why can't we get DNA from all of it?
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And Ethan, what the fuck? Why would they be shocked when they were looking for it? Yeah, kind of exactly.
Why would they be shocked if they were looking for it? Yeah.
And let's see here. We have DNA from older organisms as well. Yep. Let's see here. But yeah, let's continue.
Pulling entire genomes and then high quality genomes out of Neanderthals. And it turns out that the Neanderthal genome is sitting right here in this room. Most of it, more than 60% of it.
So here's a very interesting fact: is that we sequenced the entire, pretty much the entire Neanderthal genome, and what we find is that their genome is 0% human, and we're like 5% Neanderthal or something like that. And this tells us something very important about hybridization: is that they were able to inbreed with us, but we were unable to interbreed with them. So that's
Right.
something
The
very
right.
interesting.
The introgression of DNA was from Neanderthals into humans, or into Homo sapiens, I should say. I don't know if we have evidence for it the other way around. I'm trying to remember if I've read any papers on going the other way, and I can't recall off the top of my head. But I know we have both Neanderthal and Denisovan introgression into the human genome. I don't know if we have it the other way. If we do, it's much less, is what I can say for sure.
Right, and this is what we would expect during speciation, because as species diverse and become more distinct from one another, we would expect that it would eventually get harder and harder for species to hybridize and inbreed. And that's kind of what we're seeing with Neanderthals. So yeah, let's continue. And we'll be going for about another 10 minutes or so and then wrap everything up.
In bits and pieces. We all share different bits and pieces. They just looked at the Negrito group, one of the Negrito groups in the Philippines. It sounds racist to say that. It means little black guy. That's just the old word, but they call themselves that, so I don't know what to call them. But it's a short people, curly hair, and real dark skin. They don't look like the rest of the Filipinos. Even before the Spanish got there, they're a different group. They have the highest levels of another archaic group called the Denisovans. They're as different from us as Neanderthals are. And we have their DNA, but they had the highest level of Denisovan ancestry than any place anyone's ever seen. They're more than 10% of their genome is non-modern. It's 3% Neanderthal, 7% or so Denisovan, and the rest of it is modern European. Is modern human. Are they subhuman if they're 10% Neanderthal?
No, dude, that's not how this works.
No, it's really
Why
not.
are we even asking that question?
No.
What are we doing? No, what? That's not how.
This is like the only response I have to this. What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your incoherent response were you ever just do anything that could be considered a rational response. I award you no points and made the flying spaghetti monster have mercy on your soul.
Yeah,
like,
that's
seriously.
not right. That's
Yeah,
not. That doesn't even like the basis for that question.
I mean, the whole idea of subhuman is nonsensical anyway.
Right. It doesn't. No, Rob. No. Why? Why are we? I'm honestly speechless at that one. I got nothing. I got what?
Yeah, that's why I wanted to play it.
That one broke. So this is like when I was listening to this. This was getting near the end, and I was only half listening at this point. So
Yeah.
that one broke my brain. Thank you, David. You have broken my brain for the night. So thanks for that. That one did it.
You're very welcome. Heathen Wizard, he's not even right about Filipino indigenous people's genetics.
Yeah, he's actually wrong. The group that he's mentioning is actually multiple lineages, and there's lots of variation. It's not one single lineage. So yeah, he's wrong about that.
Yeah, he's wrong about that too. Surprise.
Okay. Oh man. You have any other clip? Oh yeah, let's finish this section. Oh goodness, I don't know if I can handle it.
Else. That means the Neanderthals are just as intelligent as everybody else. That means the Neanderthals, because they're our ancestors and perfectly intelligent, were Homo sapiens.
Wait a minute. Pause. Stop. You got to stop there. Wait. Neanderthals are our ancestors now? We came from them? Adam and Eve from Neanderthals?
I want to back that up just to make sure we didn't mishear or he didn't misspeak. I just wanted to back it up.
There's no way. There's no way.
Yeah, and by the way, it's just pointing out, just because they have cultural history and all that type of stuff does not mean they're Homo sapiens. So those things do not connect.
All right, let's
intelligence as everybody else. That means the Neanderthals are just as intelligent as everybody else. That means the Neanderthals, because they're our ancestors and perfectly intelligent,
No, that's what he said.
Yeah, I just wanted to look at the transcript just to be sure.
There's no... They can't... So they are Homo sapiens. So Neanderthals are... Let's just lay this out, right? Because now I'm trying to make this work, and there's gears that are grinding in my brain. Neanderthals are Homo sapiens. They have culture, they have intelligence, whatever. They are Homo sapiens. We interbred with them. They're Homo sapiens. Okay. Neanderthals are our ancestors. If Neanderthals are our ancestors, then that means if extant humans, I'm assuming that's what he means when he says our ancestors, like people that exist today, if Neanderthals are our ancestors, then that would mean in his
This is why I actually checked the
situation,
transcript, because I don't think that's what he was actually saying. Let me just go back and play it just one more time.
And they're perfectly intelligent. We're Homo sapiens, descendants of Adam, descendants of Noah, actually.
Oh, okay. He says or. In the transcript you see it's or.
Yeah,
I
sure.
heard it as are.
So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I heard it is. So that's why I wanted to go back and check the transcript and slow it down just to make sure that's what we were actually hearing. That's why I wanted to slow down.
Thank you.
I heard the same thing. I heard the same exact thing as you did. That's why I wanted to kind of back up, slow down, just to make sure I didn't mishear him.
For anybody confused, I heard A-R-E, but the actual word was O-R. And that was very confusing. Well. But now I got it. Yeah. Now, good call with the transcript. Yes, it's or. Okay, that makes sense.
That's why
I mean, it doesn't make sense, but like it's not contradictory with the thing he said 2 minutes earlier, is what I mean when I say it makes sense.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to double check.
Well.
All right. How do we get all the diversity in this room? There's a lot of diversity. I see people from different racial backgrounds.
Oh, this is
how do we get all the
patriarchal drive part? I think it is.
Yes,
I think this is the patriarchal drive part. Oh, please don't play this. My brain can't take it. It's just a made up process. It's not real. It assumes that people lived for 500 years and were having kids the whole time.
I wrote a paper. Yeah, it's patriarchal drive. Yeah, the genetic effect on really old men having children in small growing populations. It's basically just an ad hoc explanation. Never mind the fact.
No, it is
that humans. It's physically and biologically possible for humans to live like past 120. And we've found lots of human fossils, and none of them are older than 100. You're not going to find a 500-year-old human in the fossil record because humans didn't live for 500 years.
It's the argument. It's a question-begging argument, right? Because if you're going to say, okay, people live for 500 years, here's the implications of that. That explains the observations. Like you're starting from the point of the thing that you're trying to support, right? You're starting from special creation, biblical story is literally true, including the ages, right? You're starting from a very particular set of assumptions there, and then you can't then turn around and say, well, look at that. The data support my point of view. It's like, dude, you assumed your point of view when you started the argument. So it's just the patriarchal drive at its core is just question begging. It's not more than that.
If you want, we can just back up. If you don't, that's fine. He actually did mention his H1N1 flu paper. That's
we don't need to. I don't need to get mad over that tonight. We'll just skip that.
Yeah, I think this might be a good place to stop, just because it just shows you exactly how much of a train wreck his speech actually was.
Yeah, that was bad. That was really bad. So what's your so I'm going to give you the last word, but I'm going to tell you my takeaway. My takeaway was that was a lot worse than I expected, because I subscribe to Dr. Carter's YouTube channel, Biblical Genetics. I've seen him talk there. I've seen him talk, doing like Is Genesis History, and I've read obviously his stuff on CMI, and like he makes actual sciencey sounding arguments, like they're wrong, but they're not good. Like they're not absurd on their face, but now I think my dog wants to come back. Hang on a second. Come here, buddy. Yeah, he wants to come back in. He was out my door barking to come back in so the arguments that Carter makes usually they're wrong, but they're not absurd on their face, right? But the arguments he was making here were really egregiously bad, including some stuff that's like really, really bad tropes, like the so-called Triceratops horn. I can't believe he brought that up. For everyone who's not familiar with that, it's a bison horn. That's the joke. It's a bison horn. It's not a Triceratops horn. And like the fact that he brings that kind of thing up is just like, it's really bad. So that's my takeaway. I don't know if he's pandering or what, but these arguments are much worse than the arguments he normally makes. That's my takeaway here. And with that, what's your takeaway?
Yeah. So my takeaway is that he is speaking at a church event, and there is a reason he is giving this 3-hour, I guess I'm just going to call it what it is, a lie-a-thon, 3-hour lie-a-thon, and at a church and not in the academic conference. Because if he were to say what he said in an academic conference, he would be laughed out and probably never welcomed back. And so I will say, though, I will say, though, that Dr. Carter and Sal both are very kind, very courteous to me. And so I do want to thank both of them for being kind. And I emailed Dr. Carter after the events, asking him a question and inviting him to have a private chat. It has been more than a week, and I still have not heard from him. So, yep.
Well, Dr. Carter, you should talk to David. You should talk to me. I would love to have you on. I think that would be great. We would have a really interesting conversation, I think, about, we could talk about whatever you want to talk about. And I have conversations with people I disagree with all the time. I've had Dr. Michael Behe on. I've had Dr. James Carter on. Love to round out the Carters. I've had Sal Cordova on a number of times. I'm going to talk to him just a couple of days over on his channel. And, I'm nice. I don't yell. I don't like call you names. Just talk about science. So come on over and we'll chat about stuff. It'll be fun, I promise.
Yep. And Rapper Diner, Liathon Nights. I didn't come up with the name Liathon, so yeah.
All right.
Those are my key takeaways.
So I know we did this at the beginning, but David Neff, tell everybody what you have coming up.
Okay, so I have a lot in the works this week. I have Dr. Mark Pollock on my channel this coming Wednesday. We're going to be talking about GMOs and other topics. You definitely don't want to miss that. Friday, I'm going to be talking to Jordan, aka Recent Doubts, on homeopathy. And Saturday at 3:00 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to be talking to a former AIT employee. And then Saturday at 9:15 p.m., I have another special interview coming up in the works. So you definitely do not want to miss that. It's going to be a lot of fun. So I have a pretty packed week this week on YouTube.
Very exciting.
So definitely come over to my channel, subscribe, and hit the bell notification. And don't forget to hit like on this video. And if you're not subscribed to Dr. Dan, do that right now. And you definitely do not want to miss that.
So I just added your channel to the video description. So everyone, once we're done, if you just refresh, you will see David's channel. Do not walk, run, and subscribe, because there's really cool stuff coming up on there. As far as what I'm doing in the immediate future, I am chatting with Sal Cordova over at his channel, Evidence and Reasons, on Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern. We are going to talk about the chapter he recently published with Sanford and Basner, and I can never pronounce Ozger. So it's about dynamics and population genetics and Fisher's fundamental theorem. I got a lot of thoughts about that book chapter. So Sal and I are going to talk about it, and it's going to be a lot of fun. That's Wednesday, 9 p.m. at Sal's house, Evidence and Reasons. Yep. And with that, everybody, thank you all so much for watching. Oh, go ahead, David.
I was just kind of wanting to do it just on a later note, since this was about anti-evolution. Just ask you, and then I'll go. What is? I asked this to Dr. Stephen Freeland as well. What is your favorite piece of evidence for evolution? Since this was a whole anti-evolution chat, we might as well just comment on up. Okay, what is the best piece of evidence for it?
Sorry, I actually, hang on a second. I just got a text message as that came in, and I wanted to make sure it didn't have something to do with one of the children being awake. Can you just say that again? I apologize.
Okay, sure, not a problem. So I asked this, since this was an anti-evolution event, I think we might wanted to do one of lighter notes, and I guess this to Stephen Freeland as well. What is your favorite piece of evidence for evolution, since this whole thing was
Oh.
anti-evolution?
Right now.
Yeah, just curious.
Right now?
Just for lighter, just to keep everything up on a light
My
note.
favorite piece of, I mean, there's no one thing that I really dig, like specifically, but I mean, just that we could observe stuff happening. I mean, we could observe multicellularity evolving in the lab. We could observe endosymbiosis happening like right now in the world, like a dozen examples of it happening right now. Like the major events in evolutionary history, we don't have to wonder if and how they could happen in the past because we can watch them happen right now. Like we're watching them happen in real time right now. And that I love. That I can't get enough of that. What about you?
Yeah. My favorite piece of evidence is from viruses and how evolutionary principles and evolutionary assumptions are being used to create vaccines and actually save lives. The fact is that these evolutionary assumptions that creationists want to roast us on have real world implications and are being used to help move the world forward. And that is my personal favorite piece of evolution evidence, because if evolution were fake, phony, and not real, that shouldn't be possible.
It wouldn't work. Yep. That's a great place to end it. David, thank you so much for coming on. It's always a pleasure. Everyone that's here, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe and share, and also go subscribe to David Neff. I'm going to call it night, everybody.
And Dr. Dan, before we go, thank you so much for hosting. I really appreciate your kindness and your support, and I really appreciate our friendship.
Me too. I really feel the same way, and I'm always happy to have you on. We always have really fun talks. So thank you so much thank you for attending this event and coming on and chatting about it. It's really cool that we could do this. So thank you. Have a great night, David. Have a great night, everyone else. Bye, everybody.